Have you ever witnessed a reunion that defied every scientific prediction about animal behavior? Where a mother's love transcended species boundaries and unleashed emotions beyond human comprehension. Deep in the Congo Basin, a wildlife rescuer's mission to save a baby gorilla from illegal pet traders would lead to a moment so extraordinary that it challenged everything experts believed about primate memory, family bonds, and the profound connections possible between human and animal hearts. Deep within the Democratic Republic of Congo's Sangha Trinational Park, where ancient rainforests stretch endlessly toward mist-shrouded horizons. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Lies one of Central Africa's last untouched wilderness sanctuaries. This UNESCO World Heritage site encompasses thousands of square kilometers of pristine jungle, where towering African mahogany trees create living cathedrals beneath canopies so dense that sunlight penetrates in scattered golden beams. The forest floor pulses with life, carpeted in decomposing leaves that release the rich, earthy scent of centuries-old growth cycles, feeding this incredible biodiversity hotspot. Crystal-clear rivers wind through valleys wrapped in perpetual humidity, their gentle flow mixing with the haunting calls of gray parrots and the distant crashes of forest elephants navigating ancient migration routes. Massive buttress roots create natural fortresses where countless species find sanctuary, while exotic orchids bloom in impossible colors along branches that have supported life for millennia. But the Congo Basin also harbors darker secrets that challenge our faith in humanity's relationship with its closest evolutionary relatives. Hidden within this paradise are criminal networks that exploit the forest's most vulnerable inhabitants. Illegal pet trade operations that tear apart gorilla families to supply wealthy collectors who view endangered infants as exotic status symbols. What was about to unfold in this pristine wilderness would prove that sometimes the most profound acts of rescue lead to reunions that transcend every scientific prediction about primate memory and family bonds. This was a story that would challenge fundamental assumptions about the emotional lives of our closest relatives, demonstrating that love, both human and animal, can survive separation, trauma, and impossible odds. The extraordinary events that were about to transform rescuer, rescued, and wild family would prove that in nature's most challenging moments, when greed threatens to destroy the most sacred bonds, heroes emerge with the courage to fight for justice. But what happened when liberation finally led to reunion, the shocking response that would leave primatologists speechless, would reveal depths of gorilla emotional intelligence that science was only beginning to understand. This is where our story begins, in a place where courage meets compassion and where one woman's determination would unleash something beautiful beyond imagination. Operating in the dangerous front lines of Congo's conservation battle worked Dr. Sarah Mbeki, a Congolese primatologist whose 12-year crusade against illegal wildlife trafficking had earned her both international recognition and death threats from criminal organizations. Standing just under 6 feet with gentle hands that bore countless scars from treating traumatized animals, her dark eyes reflected the accumulated wisdom of someone who had witnessed both humanity's worst cruelties and its most profound compassion toward endangered species. Dr. Mbeki's mobile rescue operation functioned from a converted military vehicle that served as both wildlife clinic and undercover investigation unit, equipped with specialized veterinary equipment alongside hidden cameras and communication devices. Her fluent command of local dialects and deep understanding of regional criminal networks had allowed her to infiltrate pet trade operations that other conservationists couldn't penetrate, documenting atrocities that would otherwise remain hidden in Congo's lawless regions. But it was her personal connection to gorilla families that truly drove her dangerous mission. Having spent 8 years studying the complex social dynamics of Western lowland gorillas, Dr. Mbeki understood that these magnificent creatures possessed emotional lives as complex as any human family, making their exploitation through illegal pet trade not just conservation crimes, but profound moral atrocities. Deep within the criminal network that Dr. Mbeki was about to infiltrate lived Casey, an 18-month-old female gorilla infant whose name meant born in difficult times in Lingala, a heartbreaking prophecy that had proven accurate when poachers killed her mother and captured her for the exotic pet market. The tiny primate's soft charcoal fur and innocent dark eyes masked the psychological trauma of violent separation from everything she had known and loved. Casey's remarkable intelligence, typical of her species, made her captivity even more devastating. At 18 months, she possessed the cognitive abilities to understand that her family was gone, that the humans holding her were responsible, and that her future held nothing but exploitation by wealthy collectors who viewed her as an exotic possession rather than a sentient being deserving of freedom and family bonds. This combination of intelligence and trauma would prove crucial to the extraordinary reunion about to unfold, an event that would challenge every assumption about primate memory, emotional capacity, and the unbreakable bonds that connect families across impossible circumstances. That humid Wednesday morning dawned peacefully over the Congo Basin's pristine canopy, with golden sunlight filtering through layers of emerald foliage, as Dr. Mbeki conducted her weekly intelligence-gathering mission through the remote villages scattered along the Sangha River. Her converted military vehicle hummed quietly along muddy roads carved through ancient jungle, the familiar sounds of forest awakening creating a symphony that had become the soundtrack to her conservation crusade. The primatologist had settled into her routine surveillance with the methodical precision of someone whose work had become both profession and calling. Her weathered hands guided the steering wheel with practiced ease while her trained eyes scanned village marketplaces for any signs of illegal wildlife activity or evidence of captured animals awaiting transport to international buyers. These morning surveys had become sacred ritual, moments of calm preparation before facing whatever wildlife emergencies the day might bring. Dr. Mbeki's reputation for successfully infiltrating criminal networks had made her the go-to investigator for the region's most complex trafficking cases, but it had also made her a target for organizations that preferred their operations to remain hidden. 50 kilometers deeper into the jungle, in a ramshackle compound hidden behind legitimate logging operations, Casey endured another day of captivity with the resigned confusion that defined her existence since losing her family. The tiny gorilla sat motionless in her inadequate wooden crate, her intelligent dark eyes fixed on the single shaft of sunlight that penetrated through gaps in the corrugated metal roof above her makeshift prison. The illegal holding facility operated with the deliberate isolation that characterizes criminal enterprises, concealed behind legitimate business fronts, and accessible only through unmarked jungle paths that discouraged casual discovery. Its crude wooden structures blended into the forest landscape through careful camouflage, while the constant humidity muffled any sounds that might attract unwanted attention from conservation authorities. For Casey, this morning routine represented 6 months of identical days, awakening to the same cramped quarters, the same inadequate meal of rotting fruit scraps, the same crushing loneliness that came from total separation from her own kind, and the mother whose protection had defined her entire existence until that terrible day when gunfire shattered her world forever. Neither Dr. Mbeki nor Casey could know that this peaceful morning routine was about to be disrupted by events that would change both their lives. Dr. Mbeki's peaceful morning surveillance was suddenly interrupted by an anomaly that made her conservation instincts flare with immediate alarm. Fresh vehicle tracks cutting through pristine jungle, where no legitimate transportation should have been operating. The deep tire impressions led away from the main river road toward an area her intelligence network had flagged as suspicious but never successfully penetrated. Following these tracks with the careful precision of someone who had learned to read the forest's warning signs through 12 years of dangerous investigations, Dr. Mbeki guided her vehicle deeper into increasingly dense vegetation. The tracks were recent, probably made within the last 24 hours, and they led toward a section of jungle that showed subtle signs of human interference, cleared undergrowth that tried to appear natural but couldn't fool her trained eye. As she navigated carefully through the camouflaged pathway, disturbing sounds began filtering through the humid air that made her blood run cold with recognition. These weren't the natural vocalizations of wild gorillas or other native species, but something else entirely. The desperate calls of an infant primate in severe psychological distress, muffled by distance and what sounded like wooden barriers. The sounds carried emotional weight that transcended species barriers, high-pitched cries that spoke of abandonment, terror, and profound loneliness that no young animal should ever experience. Dr. Mbeki's 12 years of wildlife rescue had taught her to distinguish between normal juvenile vocalizations and genuine trauma responses, and what she was hearing fell squarely into the latter category. Following the heartbreaking sounds with growing determination and horror, she began to make out the outline of crude wooden structures partially concealed beneath corrugated metal roofing and camouflage netting. The illegal facility had been designed to blend into the forest landscape, but the desperate cries of its imprisoned inhabitant betrayed its location to anyone with the knowledge and courage to investigate. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As Dr. Mbeki parked her vehicle behind a screen of dense vegetation and approached on foot, the full scope of the criminal operation began to reveal itself. This wasn't a small-scale poaching outfit. It was a sophisticated holding facility designed to house captured wildlife awaiting transport to international buyers who would pay enormous sums for exotic pets. The sounds of infant distress that had drawn her here were growing stronger with each step, and her heart raced with the realization that she was about to confront one of the illegal pet trade operations she had been hunting throughout her career. As Dr. Mbeki crept closer to the illegal facility, the scene that greeted her was every primatologist's worst nightmare. Through gaps in the camouflage netting, she could see a series of wooden crates that violated every principle of animal welfare and species dignity. The structures were deliberately cramped, designed to minimize transportation costs rather than provide adequate living space for their imprisoned inhabitants. In the central crate, the source of the desperate vocalizations that had drawn her here, sat Casey, a magnificent infant western lowland gorilla, whose tiny frame was grotesquely confined within wooden walls, barely large enough for her to stand upright. The crate measured no more than 4 feet by 3 feet, forcing the intelligent primate to remain in permanent cramped positions that must have caused chronic pain and psychological deterioration. The baby gorilla's once lustrous charcoal fur had become matted and dull from 6 months of inadequate nutrition and psychological stress. Her intelligent dark eyes, which should have been exploring forest canopies and learning social behaviors from her family, instead stared with the hollow confusion of a creature whose world had been violently destroyed through human greed. What made the scene even more heartbreaking was the evidence of Casey's attempts to maintain connection with her lost family. Despite her cramped quarters, she had arranged the few leaves thrown into her crate with careful precision, creating small patterns that spoke of an intelligent mind desperately trying to replicate the nest-building behaviors her mother would have taught her in the wild. The crate itself was a monument to criminal exploitation, wooden floors stained with months of waste, rusted wire mesh that showed signs of desperate escape attempts, and a corrugated metal roof that trapped humid air and created stifling conditions during Congo's hottest days. A single water container, green with algae, provided the only hydration source. Around Casey's prison, Dr. Mbeki could see additional crates containing other captured wildlife, infant chimpanzees, exotic birds, and forest antelopes, all suffering similar conditions of systematic neglect and psychological torture. The entire facility represented a criminal enterprise built on the destruction of Central Africa's most vulnerable wildlife families. Most devastating was the isolation. This highly social infant had been deliberately separated from her own kind, creating psychological trauma that went far beyond physical deprivation. For Casey, 6 months of solitary confinement had inflicted wounds that might never fully heal. The sight before her triggered something profound within Dr. Mbeki's consciousness, an emotional response that transcended her professional training and reached directly into the core of her humanity as both scientist and mother. Casey's hollow eyes seemed to look right through her, reflecting 6 months of abandoned hope and systematic exploitation that challenged every principle Dr. Mbeki had dedicated her life to defending. Standing in the humid shadows of the illegal facility, the primatologist found herself facing an impossible tactical situation that went far beyond simple animal rescue. This wasn't just liberation of captive wildlife. This was infiltrating a sophisticated criminal operation protected by dangerous people who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate threats to their lucrative business. The facility's remote location and professional camouflage indicated significant financial backing and organized criminal management. Dr. Mbeki's tactical mind raced through the brutal mathematics of intervention. A single conservationist against an unknown number of armed traffickers represented suicide odds, especially in terrain that favored those familiar with the facility's layout and escape routes. Her converted vehicle contained medical equipment and communication devices, not weapons, and her satellite phone might not penetrate the dense jungle canopy effectively enough to summon immediate backup. Yet something deeper than logic was driving her response. Casey's obvious intelligence made her suffering even more heartbreaking. This wasn't just physical captivity. but psychological torture of a creature whose cognitive abilities allowed her to understand that her family was gone and that humans were responsible for destroying everything she had known and loved. The most devastating aspect of the situation was the systematic nature of the exploitation. This wasn't accidental neglect or ignorant mismanagement. It was deliberate commodification designed to maximize profit while minimizing costs, treating a sentient being with complex emotional needs as mere merchandise in an illegal marketplace that thrived on the destruction of endangered species families. Dr. Mbeki found herself crossing a psychological boundary that separated professional wildlife conservation from personal moral crusade. The sight of Kizzy's resignation and the evidence of months of systematic abuse was triggering responses she couldn't ignore, even if intervention meant risking everything she had built in 12 years of conservation work. Every minute of hesitation meant continued suffering for a creature who had already endured far more than any infant should have to bear. Rather than becoming the passive witness Dr. Mbeki initially appeared to be, she transformed into the active catalyst that would change everything. Her 12 years of conservation experience had taught her that sometimes the greatest acts of wildlife protection required abandoning conventional protocols in favor of immediate moral action, regardless of personal risk or professional consequences. Working with practiced efficiency born of countless emergency rescues, Dr. Mbeki quickly assessed the facility's security measures and operational patterns. The absence of guards during midday hours suggested the traffickers operated primarily during dawn and dusk, using low-light conditions to move animals and conduct business away from potential conservation authority patrols. Her primatology training proved invaluable as she approached Kizzy's crate with the calm, gentle demeanor that had earned the trust of countless traumatized animals throughout her career. The tiny gorilla's initial reaction was predictable. 6 months of human cruelty had taught her to fear any bipedal approach, and she pressed herself against the far corner of her cramped prison with wide, terrified eyes. But Dr. Mbeki possessed something the traffickers had never shown: infinite patience and genuine compassion combined with deep understanding of gorilla psychology and communication patterns. Speaking in soft lingala while maintaining non-threatening body language, she began the delicate process of earning trust from a creature who had every reason to view humans as sources of pain and abandonment. The breakthrough moment came when Dr. Mbeki began humming a gentle melody while extending her hand through the wooden slats of the crate, not demanding contact but simply offering the possibility of gentle interaction. For several minutes, Kizzy studied this unusual human behavior with the analytical intelligence that made young gorillas among the most cognitively advanced primates on Earth. Then, in a gesture that would haunt Dr. Mbeki for the rest of her life, the traumatized infant slowly extended one tiny finger to make the briefest contact with the primatologist's outstretched hand. It was the first voluntary interaction Kizzy had experienced with a human being since her mother's murder 6 months earlier. Using specialized tools from her mobile clinic, Dr. Mbeki began the painstaking process of dismantling the crate's crude locking mechanisms while maintaining constant, reassuring contact with Kizzy through gentle vocalizations and patient movements. The moment Dr. Mbeki successfully dismantled the crate's locking mechanism, what followed defied every protocol in wildlife rescue manuals. Instead of the cautious, gradual rehabilitation process typically required for traumatized infant primates, Kizzy demonstrated remarkable trust by immediately moving toward her liberator with deliberate intention rather than fearful hesitation. The tiny gorilla's first steps outside her wooden prison were tentative but purposeful, her small limbs trembling with a combination of physical weakness from months of confinement and emotional overwhelm at experiencing freedom after half a lifetime of captivity. Dr. Mbeki remained perfectly still, allowing Kizzy to set the pace in terms of their interaction while prepared to intervene if the traumatized infant showed signs of panic or regression. What happened next challenged every assumption about the rehabilitation timeline for severely traumatized wildlife. Rather than fleeing immediately into the jungle as expected, Kizzy turned toward Dr. Mbeki with unmistakable recognition and what could only be described as profound gratitude. The intelligent infant's dark eyes locked onto her rescuer's face with an intensity that spoke of deep understanding about what had just transpired. Dr. Mbeki quickly contacted the Sangha Trinational Park Authority using her satellite communication equipment, reporting the location of the illegal facility and requesting immediate backup to secure the site and rescue the remaining captive animals. Her voice carried the urgency of someone who knew that criminal organizations typically responded swiftly to security breaches. The response was immediate and professional. Within 40 minutes, a helicopter rescue team was airborne and heading toward their coordinates, equipped with specialized equipment for managing large-scale wildlife recovery operations and law enforcement support to secure the criminal site and arrest any traffickers who remained in the area. But as Dr. Mbeki prepared to guide Casey toward the extraction point where the rescue helicopter would land, the infant gorilla did something that would challenge every scientific understanding of primate behavior and emotional intelligence. Instead of clinging desperately to her rescuer as expected, Casey began exhibiting behaviors that suggested she was actively communicating about something important, something that her infant mind desperately needed Dr. Mbeki to understand. The traumatized gorilla seemed to be trying to tell her rescuer something crucial about her past, her family, or perhaps her deepest desire for what freedom should ultimately mean. What unfolded at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center 3 months later would be remembered as one of the most extraordinary displays of primate family recognition ever documented. As Dr. Mbeki prepared Casey for her gradual reintroduction to wild gorilla society, the miraculous happened. Field researchers reported a silverback searching the facility's perimeter with behavior patterns that suggested he was looking for something specific. When Dr. Mbeki brought Casey to the observation area, the infant's reaction defied every scientific prediction about memory retention in traumatized primates. The moment she saw the massive silverback through the protective barrier, Casey released vocalizations that hadn't been heard since her rescue, the specific family calls that young gorillas use to communicate with their fathers. The silverback's response was even more shocking. Despite 6 months of separation and the infant's changed appearance from captivity stress, the magnificent male immediately recognized his daughter. His gentle approach and protective positioning demonstrated paternal behaviors that proved gorilla family bonds survive even the most traumatic separations. The reunion that followed challenged fundamental assumptions about primate emotional complexity. The silverback's patient gentleness with his recovered daughter, combined with his obvious recognition of Dr. Mbeki as the human responsible for Casey's return, created behavioral patterns that no wildlife expert had ever witnessed. As father and daughter were finally reunited under careful supervision, their interaction displayed emotional intelligence that forced researchers to reconsider everything they thought they knew about gorilla family dynamics, and the profound depths of paternal love that transcend even the most devastating trauma. What happened in the months following Casey's reunion with her father redefined everything scientists believed about primate rehabilitation and family bonds. Unlike typical rescued gorillas who required extensive isolation and gradual reintroduction, Casey thrived immediately upon returning to her family group, demonstrating remarkable resilience and the healing power of paternal love. The silverback's acceptance of Dr. Mbeki as an honorary family protector created unprecedented research opportunities. For the first time in conservation history, a wild gorilla family allowed sustained human observation, providing invaluable insights into their complex social structures and emotional lives. Most remarkably, Casey's rescue sparked a cascade of conservation victories. Dr. Mbeki's documentation of the illegal facility led to international arrests and the dismantling of a major pet trade network spanning 3 countries. The evidence rescued alongside Casey saved dozens of other endangered animals and shut down operations across Central Africa. Today, 5 years later, Casey thrives as a healthy juvenile in her family group while maintaining a unique relationship with Dr. Mbeki, who continues her conservation work, knowing that some rescues create bonds that transcend species boundaries. Their story proved that love, whether human or gorilla, possesses the power to overcome the darkest human cruelty. In the Congo's ancient forests, where family bonds proved stronger than trauma, one woman's courage unleashed something beautiful that continues to inspire conservation efforts worldwide. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.